Next speaker will be Roly Owers on what is social license to operate. I think that's a very important issue, especially in the equine industry in this moment.
Thank you, René, and thank you, Saddle Research Trust, for the opportunity to speak today. I was at the University of Liverpool Vet School recently, and now here at the University of Nottingham. Student facilities have improved, haven't they? What's wrong with the Nissan hut? Following on Anne's story about royals and mobile phones, apparently when someone met the Queen recently, their mobile phone went off and she responded, said, "You better get that, it might be someone important." So I'm not here to tell you jokes. I'm here, if I can get this thing working, there we go, to just carry on the sort of theme of taking us to a bit more of a helicopter level rather than getting into the detail about specific issues. And it's been an extraordinary day so far today. Just to talk about a changing world we live in and why a social license to operate, I think, has huge attraction and relevance to the equine sector today. To give that a little bit of a go around, and then just to end up say, what does that all mean for us here today? So very quickly, World Horse Welfare was founded in 1927, and at the heart of what World Horse Welfare does is to support the horse-human partnership, whether that's sport, leisure, working, farming, therapy, or the increasing number of other ways we utilise horses in today's society. We have strong veterinary credentials, and Pat Harris is on our Veterinary Advisory Committee, for example, and we also are advisors to regulators, the FEI, and in the UK, the British Horse Racing Authority. But a key part of what we do, and I think today is a great example of that, is partnership working. Because certainly through the British Horse Council, with the likes of the Animal Health Trust, with the Saddle Research Trust, with the Horse Trust, and a myriad of other organisations that are here to support and work with the equine sector, we will only get real credible change, especially for equine welfare, if we work in partnership. So if we look at today's world, few would disagree, I guess. It is changing, and it's changing in an extraordinary way. The way the public perceive animal welfare is changing. There are growing expectations for animals to be treated well, and this is especially relevant in a world where animals are used for entertainment and sport. As we know, through Grand National, the Cheltenham Festival, the issue around equine fatalities, the concern around that goes up and up. And of course, as we've heard about today, we live in the age of social media. What happens in one part of the world will literally be global seconds later. And these kind of changes are not going to slow down. We live in a world where animal rights enthusiasts are getting more and more organised. And therefore, there is a changing view of what is acceptable with regards to animal welfare. But there's also a shift in public values, what people will now accept. I was speaking to Eleanor earlier, and she said a rider was accused of exploiting their animal for money, and he harumphed and went, "I think you'll find it's the other way round." But nevertheless, there is a really serious note here, because there is a belief that horses belong in fields. So that's a view that World Horse Welfare passionately disagrees with it, but we have to recognise that it's there. So I think that's why the concept of a social licence is so relevant. This is something that evolved originally in the 19th century, but it's been used more recently in the mining sector. And of course, that is a sector which puts humans at great risk when they're going underground, but also, as we know, puts the environment at great risk. And what it is, it's a non-written but binding contract with society, which effectively gives the equine sector license to operate. And of course, what this is all about is not only doing the right thing with our horses, but it's also telling people that you are doing the right thing with your horses. And that, in that regard, we all, whatever role we have within the equine sector, we all have a role to play in cultivating that license. Can we lose that license? I would suggest that we absolutely can. You only have to look to two examples, both in Australia. One within the greyhound sector, which effectively is now almost banned because increasingly it's recognised that the greyhound sector in Australia ignored growing public concern about canine injuries on the racetrack and also what happened to their dogs after their sporting life was over. But you also see it in national hunt racing, where now I think it's been banned in all but one state in Australia, again, for very similar reasons. What is the state then of the social licence in the equine sector in the UK today? I think rather like my school reports, you could say we could do better. But we do have a social licence and it's all of our responsibility to keep it. But we know too often in the press, we see the stories around horse sport is around abuse, it's around doping, it's around fatalities, it's around aggressive training techniques. And this is going to go on. And it's our responsibility of all of us to actually make sure that what we are doing is not only putting the horse first and truly putting the horse first, but letting people know about it too. And I think a more recent example, if you're not convinced by the state of the social licence, is that earlier this year there was a petition by an animal rights organisation in the UK that secured over 100,000 signatures on the Westminster government website. That meant there was a debate in Parliament about whether the British Horse Racing Authority should be stripped of its right to regulate equine welfare in racing. Now, bearing in mind, we currently, maybe come back next week, it'll be different. We currently have a Conservative government who are generally non-regulatory. They actually gave the BHA quite a hard time because whilst the minister recognised that the sector was doing a lot around equine welfare, he clearly said that the BHA needed to do more about reducing fatalities and improving the welfare of racehorses. And just to show that what a job there is to actually educate people, the opposition spokesperson said we need to hear from the regulator about when they're going to reduce equine fatalities in racing to zero. So, what does it mean? It does mean that we've heard so much today about the relevance of evidence, because it's not just about stamping out bad practice and doing what's right today. It's finding out, as we use horses and utilise this horses more, we find out and we know more. And that's all about changing. Our understanding of equine behaviour has been transformed over the last decade, and it will certainly grow. Our understanding about the impacts of tack, the impacts of good and bad practices, the impacts of aids like spurs grow every year. And it's up to us to make sure, because the public will expect us to be on top of the latest research. Now, of course, we haven't talked much about rider weight today, so I thought I'd have my own little go. But I think my passion here is, forgive the pun, it is a huge issue. But I think the issue of equine obesity, as Sue told us earlier, is in fact, I think it is the biggest welfare challenge in the UK today. And I'd also go as far to say that an overweight horse is in a situation where the excess weight of that overweight horse is over and above what it can take. So effectively you have to reduce that. If we say it's 15% and 5% of that is due to an overweight horse, then the rider can only be 10%. It's a big, big impact. We've also heard about the breeds of horses, and I think that is so relevant. But I'd strongly suggest your cob can, because cobs are very overbred in this country, and I can assure you that World Horse Welfare and many other charities have a lovely selection of cobs for you to rehome today. But they are really effective and wonderful breeds of horses to cope with the changing nature of the humankind. But also, let's not kid ourselves about the level of education that's required. It is news to most horse owners in this country that you have to have the saddle fitted the first time, let alone have it be done twice a year. So what does it all mean? As I've tried to say, we need to be proactive in putting the horse first. But that is not where the journey ends. It's about taking the public with us. How do we do that? We have to be transparent in all that we do. We have to be accountable to the public. The days of when the sector can just say, we know what we're doing, the public doesn't, we'll just get on with what we do, are very much over. We do have to listen to new evidence, but above all, the tricky thing about new evidence is that we might have to change the way we do things. That is not always very, very easy, but it is certainly very, very important. Thank you very much.